Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and esteemed faculty members. Welcome to Scientific Oration on the occasion of 66 Disnatalis of Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Pajajaran. The scientific oration will be presented by Professor Harman Opawol, PhD, as Professor of Marketing from Department of Marketing, Monash Business School, Monash University, Australia. And Dr. Dhani Amrul Ihdan, SA MSc, as Vice President of Mind ID. Ladies and gentlemen, I respectfully invite you to stand up. Karatagan Pajajaran.
Pajajaran, mumpuk kamarkara, budi pikiran dan keahlian. Pajajaran, kagulen kita, sekar, harum kagungan lama cari, ibadah sinar, Nusantara, jalan
Universitas Anthem with utmost reverence. We shall now observe a solemn moment of silence led by the Dean of Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Pajajaran, Profesor Dr. Haji SAMS AKCA. The Dean, along with the esteemed members, are graciously invited to take off your beret.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Marilah kita bersama-sama mengheningkan cipta bagi para arwah pahlawan, khususnya para pahlawan pendidikan dan orang-orang yang telah berjasa bagi Universitas Pajajaran yang telah mendahului kita. Mengheningkan cipta dimulai.
Dengar seluruh angkasa raya memuji pahlawan negara.
Selesai.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are kindly requested to resume your seats. The recitation of the sacred verses of the Holy Quran, delivered by Arfan Farohi.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A'udzu billahi minasy syaithanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Qul Allahumma malikal mulki tu'til mulka man tasha' man منك ممن تشاء وتعز من تشاء وتذل من تشاء بيدك الخير إنك على كل شيء قدير تولج الليل في النهار وتولج النهار في الليل وتولج النهار في الليل وتخرج الحي من الميت وتخرج الحي من الميت وتخرج الميت من الحي وتخرج الميت من الحي وترزق من تشاء بغير حساب وتخرج الميت من الحي وترزق من تشاء بغير حساب صدق الله العظيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
The speech commemoration, followed by the first scientific oration of the 66th Dies Natalis of Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Pajajaran, delivered by the Dean of the Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Pajajaran, Profesor Dr. Hajah Nunui Nur Afia, SEMS AKCA.
Dengan nama Allah yang Maha Pengasih dan Maha Penyayang. Dengan ini kami menyatakan upacara Dies Natalis ke-66 Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Padjadjaran dengan acara utama orasi ilmiah oleh Profesor Harman Ovel, PhD, Professor of Marketing, Department of Marketing, Monash Business School, Monash University. Dr. Dhani Amrul Ikhdan, SA MSc, Wakil Direktur Utama Main ID. Dengan ini dibuka. Ya. Selanjutnya saya akan menyampaikan orasi Dekan Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Padjadjaran. Yang saya hormati dan saya cintai Rektor Universitas Padjadjaran, para Wakil Rektor Universitas Padjadjaran, Ketua Dewan Profesor, Ketua Senas Fakultas, Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis, Ketua IKA FEB Unpad, Wakil Dekan, Manajer, dan para pengelola di lingkungan FEB, serta hadirin seluruhnya yang saya hormati. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Segala puji dan syukur kita panjatkan kehadirat Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, bahwa pada hari ini dengan sepenuh karunia dari Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala kita dapat berjumpa dalam keadaan sehat walafiat di dalam Dies Natalis ke-66. Usia 66 tahun merupakan usia yang sudah sangat tua jika melihat pada rentang usia manusia. Namun di sisi lain, usia 66 tahun ini merupakan usia yang semestinya mampu memberikan kematangan organisasi serta pula membuktikan kontribusi dari Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Padjadjaran kepada bangsa dan negara dan juga kepada dunia internasional. Tahun 2023 akan segera berakhir. Dan tahun 2023 ini merupakan tahun di mana kita memulai kembali kehidupan yang normal setelah berakhirnya pandemi COVID-19 yang selama lebih kurang 3 tahun kita alami. Pendidikan, riset, dan pengabdian kepada masyarakat diharapkan dapat kembali ditempuh dengan optimal setelah selama 3 tahun kinerja kita terhambat oleh pandemi. Tahun 2023 ini dari sisi ekonomi juga kita melihat posisi dan kondisi geopolitik yang memiliki pengaruh besar pada perekonomian dunia, yaitu perang Rusia dengan Ukraina serta Israel dengan Palestina. Tahun 2023 ini pun masih merupakan tahun berat dari sisi ekonomi. Dari sisi ekonomi dan usaha global dapat kita lihat bersama bahwa di berbagai belahan dunia, negara maju maupun negara berkembang saat ini tengah menghadapi tantangan berupa kenaikan biaya hidup, increase in cost of living yang mengakibatkan krisis. Harga-harga komoditas global naik dan terdapat potensi pelambatan ekonomi dunia, bahkan menuju di ancaman resesi ataupun depresi ekonomi secara global. Tahun 2024 yang akan datang juga tentunya merupakan tahun yang penuh dengan tantangan. Tahun 2024 merupakan tahun penentuan nasib bangsa Indonesia dengan adanya pemilihan serentak. Tentunya pemilihan pemerintahan ini memainkan peranan penting dalam pengembangan pendidikan tinggi di Indonesia. Namun tentunya Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Unpad siap menjadi bagian dari pemerintahan di masa yang akan datang. Karena kami yakin bahwa pemerintah Indonesia tahun 2024 merupakan pemerintah terbaik yang kita harapkan adalah merupakan pilihan dari rakyat yang diridhoi oleh Allah Subhanahu wa taala. Sebagai makhluk ciptaan Allah Subhanahu wa taala, situasi ekonomi dan bisnis global ini tentunya merupakan refleksi diri yang tepat untuk kita. Kita tidak boleh menyombongkan diri dengan apa yang kita miliki, tetapi dengan aneka macam cobaan serta tantangan yang berat, kita tentunya wajib menyiapkan diri buat menghadapi hari esok yang tentunya dipenuhi dengan ketidakpastian. Tetapi suasana optimisme perlu terus diciptakan sehingga pencapaian tujuan berasal dari Fakultas Ekonomi dan Usaha Unpad bisa tercapai. Hadirin yang saya hormati, pada bagian pertama ini izinkan saya sebagai Dekan Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis untuk mengapresiasi tema Dies Natalis tahun ini yang mengambil tema mengenai keberlanjutan. Keberlanjutan merupakan suatu tren yang luar biasa dalam kehidupan saat ini. Tahun 2015 merupakan momentum awal keberlanjutan dengan mulai dicanangkannya Sustainable Development Goals atau SDGs yang harus dicapai dunia pada tahun 2030. Definisi keberlanjutan merujuk pada suatu konsep atau prinsip yang menekankan kemampuan suatu sistem atau kegiatan untuk bertahan atau eksis dalam jangka panjang tanpa merusak lingkungan ekonomi dan masyarakat. Ada 3 dimensi utama dalam konsep keberlanjutan, yaitu dimensi ekonomi, dimensi sosial, dan dimensi lingkungan. Dalam konteks global, konsep keberlanjutan telah menjadi sangat relevan, terutama dalam menghadapi tantangan seperti perubahan iklim, kehilangan biodiversitas, dan ketidaksetaraan ekonomi. Banyak organisasi, perusahaan, dan pemerintah telah mengadopsi prinsip-prinsip keberlanjutan sebagai panduan dalam mengembangkan kebijakan dan praktik mereka dalam mencapai keseimbangan antara kepentingan saat ini dan masa depan. Keberlanjutan dalam perspektif pendidikan tinggi. Hadirin yang saya hormati, pada bagian kedua ini izinkan saya untuk menjelaskan bagaimana peran kita sebagai pendidikan tinggi, khususnya Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis, dalam mengimplementasikan nilai-nilai keberlanjutan ini dalam tridharma perguruan tinggi. Pendidikan tinggi memiliki peran sentral dalam membentuk masa depan masyarakat dan planet kita. Namun, tantangan global seperti perubahan iklim, ketidaksetaraan, dan kemiskinan menyoroti urgensi untuk menjadikan pendidikan tinggi sebagai agen perubahan positif. Keberlanjutan dalam pendidikan tinggi mencakup pengembangan yang memperhatikan 3 dimensi utama, yaitu ekonomi, sosial, dan lingkungan. Perguruan tinggi diharapkan untuk tidak hanya mencetak lulusan yang kompeten secara akademis, tetapi juga bertanggung jawab sosial dan lingkungan. Tantangan-tantangan implementasi keberlanjutan dalam pendidikan tinggi diantaranya adalah sebagai berikut. Yang pertama adalah akseptabilitas dan inklusivitas. Tantangan pertama adalah memastikan aksesibilitas dan inklusivitas pendidikan tinggi bagi semua lapisan masyarakat. Yang kedua, tantangan kurangnya keterlibatan stakeholder. Untuk mencapai keberlanjutan diperlukan keterlibatan aktif dari pemerintah, sektor swasta, dan masyarakat. Tantangan terkait adalah kurangnya keterlibatan dan dukungan dari stakeholder dalam mengimplementasikan praktek keberlanjutan di institusi pendidikan tinggi. Yang ketiga, pengelolaan sumber daya. Pengelolaan sumber daya termasuk energi dan limbah merupakan tantangan krusial. Pendidikan tinggi perlu mengadopsi praktek-praktek berkeberlanjutan dalam infrastruktur dan operasional sehari-hari untuk mengurangi dampak lingkungan. Yang keempat adalah kurikulum berkelanjutan. Mendesain kurikulum yang mencakup aspek-aspek keberlanjutan adalah tantangan yang nyata. Integrasi nilai-nilai keberlanjutan ke dalam kurikulum akan membantu lulusan untuk menjadi pemimpin yang berkesadaran tinggi. Tentunya untuk mencapai keempat aspek keberlanjutan dalam pendidikan tinggi tersebut, kita memerlukan program kerja nyata. Inilah beberapa hal yang dapat dilakukan oleh pendidikan tinggi. Pendidikan berbasis nilai-nilai keberlanjutan. Institusi pendidikan tinggi perlu mengadopsi model pendidikan yang memasukkan nilai-nilai keberlanjutan ke dalam seluruh spektrum kurikulum. Ini dapat melibatkan pembelajaran interdisipliner yang mendorong pemahaman holistik terhadap masalah-masalah global. Kemitraan dan keterlibatan stakeholder melibatkan pemerintah, industri, dan masyarakat sipil dalam proses pengambilan keputusan dan implementasi kebijakan pendidikan tinggi dapat memastikan dukungan yang lebih besar dan lebih berkelanjutan. Yang ketiga, infrastruktur ramah lingkungan. Pendidikan tinggi dapat mengadopsi praktek-praktek berkelanjutan dalam infrastruktur mereka seperti menggunakan energi terbarukan, mengurangi limbah, dan mengedepankan penggunaan teknologi ramah lingkungan. Penelitian dan inovasi berkelanjutan. Perguruan tinggi dapat memainkan peran penting dalam penelitian dan inovasi berkelanjutan, menciptakan solusi-solusi untuk tantangan-tantangan global melalui kolaborasi antar disiplin. Keberlanjutan dalam pendidikan tinggi bukan hanya tanggung jawab institusi pendidikan, tetapi juga tuntutan global untuk menciptakan masa depan yang berkelanjutan. Dengan mengatasi tantangan yang dihadapi dan menerapkan strategi-strategi berkelanjutan, pendidikan tinggi dapat menjadi kekuatan positif dalam mewujudkan perubahan yang dibutuhkan demi kesejahteraan global. Khusus kaitannya dengan FEB, tentunya keberlanjutan ini membuka berbagai peluang-peluang implementasi kegiatan tridharma yang beragam di level nasional dan internasional. Misalnya, pengembangan terhadap akuntansi keberlanjutan, pengembangan ekonomi keberlanjutan, dan pengembangan manajemen bisnis keberlanjutan. Keterlibatan dengan pemangku kepentingan, transparansi dengan pelaporan dan upaya untuk mengukur dan mengurangi jejak lingkungan perusahaan. Ketiga aspek ini, akuntansi keberlanjutan, ekonomi keberlanjutan, dan manajemen bisnis keberlanjutan merupakan bagian integral dari gerakan global menuju pembangunan berkelanjutan. Praktek ini mencerminkan kesadaran bahwa bisnis tidak hanya harus menghasilkan keuntungan finansial, tetapi juga harus berkontribusi positif terhadap masyarakat, lingkungan di sekitar kita, dan untuk menciptakan dampak positif jangka panjang. Internasionalisasi UNPAD dan keberlanjutan. Terkait dengan keberlanjutan ini, kita baru saja memperoleh kabar yang sangat menggembirakan. Universitas Padjadjaran masuk ke dalam 5 besar perguruan tinggi terbaik Indonesia dalam pemeringkatan QS World Universities Ranking Sustainability 2024. Unpad berada pada peringkat 5 nasional, peringkat 118 di regional Asia, dan peringkat 528 dunia dari hampir 1.400 perguruan tinggi yang dinilai oleh QS World. Keberhasilan ini merupakan suatu berkah yang patut kita syukuri bersama, dan tentunya mari kita tetap bersemangat untuk mampu mewujudkan keberlanjutan di perguruan tinggi kita yang tercinta ini. FEB Unpad juga berupaya keras untuk juga mendukung internasionalisasi dari sisi keberhasilan ini. FEB Unpad bangga pada 2 orang guru besar kita, yaitu Profesor Armida Ali Sahbana dan Profesor Arif Ansori Yusuf, yang merupakan inisiator dan salah satu pusat unggulan SDGs Center yang telah berkontribusi bagi implementasi SDGs di Indonesia. FEB Unpad bertekad untuk lebih mengimplementasikan pendidikan, penelitian, dan pengabdian kepada masyarakat yang memang memiliki nilai ekonomi, sosial, dan lingkungan, sehingga mampu menjadi salah satu motor dalam menaikkan peringkat sustainability Unpad secara nasional dan internasional. Refleksi diri. Hadirin sekalian yang berbahagia, tidak terasa 66 tahun Unpad dan FEB telah mengabdi bagi Indonesia. Tentunya tercipta berbagai kontribusi dan pengabdian berbagai sivitas akademika. Pada usia ke-66 tahun ini, seperti yang selalu kita lakukan dalam tradisi orasi Dies Natalis ini, marilah kita melakukan refleksi diri atas apa yang telah kita lakukan, dan tentunya kita patut memberikan apresiasi terhadap para pihak yang telah bahu-membahu membangun FEB Unpad selama 66 tahun berdirinya. Apresiasi pertama, tidak hentinya marilah kita sampaikan kepada para pendahulu kita, para dekan FEB yang telah berjasa membangun Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis selama 66 tahun. Tentunya kepemimpinan merupakan kunci sukses dari suatu implementasi strategi. Untuk itu, mari kita berikan penghargaan yang tinggi kepada yang pertama, Profesor Iwa Kusuma Sumantri. Kedua, Profesor EG Surya Sumantri. Ketiga, Dr. Andes Sanusi Harja Dinata. Yang keempat, Profesor Yuyun Wirasasmita. Yang kelima, Dr. Andes Suharsono Sagir. Yang keenam, Dr. Andes Muhammad Hasan Puradimaja. Yang ketujuh, Profesor Arifin Wirakusuma. Yang kedelapan, Profesor Sutaryo Salim. Yang kesembilan, Profesor Usman Hardi. Yang kesepuluh, Profesor Suripto Samit. Yang kesebelas, Profesor Sutiasti Sumitro Remi yang kami cintai. Yang ke-11 yang ke-12 Profesor Erni Tisnawati Sule, yang ke-13 Profesor Nuri Effendi yang kami cintai. Dan yang ke-14 adalah Profesor Yudi Aziz. Tahun 2023 ini kita ditinggalkan oleh Profesor Erni Tisnawati Sule. Kepergian beliau tentunya merupakan kehilangan yang sangat besar untuk FEB Unpad. Beliaulah yang melandasi pembangunan FEB Unpad menuju internasionalisasi, dan tentunya kita patut berterima kasih kepada beliau atas jasa-jasa yang diberikannya. Dalam momen orasi ini, mari sejenak kita mendoakan almarhumah Profesor Erni Tisnawati Sule, semoga amal ibadahnya diterima oleh Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Amin ya Rabbal Alamin. Ke-14 dekan tersebut telah memberikan kontribusi dan pengabdian luar biasa, serta tentunya kemajuan Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Unpad tidak mungkin tercipta tanpa kerja keras para pemimpin. Marilah kita bersama pada momen 66 tahun ini merefleksikan diri kita untuk mampu mencontoh keteladanan serta para pemimpin terdahulu. Karena kita semua adalah pemimpin dan tentunya pemimpin perlu memberikan teladan yang baik. Kita doakan selalu bahwa seluruh amal baik pemimpin kita diterima oleh Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Dalam kesempatan ini pula izinkan kami memberikan apresiasi kepada para dosen FEB Unpad yang telah berkiprah dan mengharumkan nama FEB Unpad baik di level nasional maupun internasional. Selanjutnya adalah alumni juga tentu berkontribusi baik pada terciptanya nama harum FEB Unpad di mata nasional maupun internasional. Dan terakhir tentu kita berikan apresiasi pada segenap tenaga kependidikan yang juga telah membantu dan mendukung berbagai kegiatan operasional di FEB Unpad dengan sepenuh hati. Maka pada kesempatan kali ini pula kami ingin berterima kasih atas jerih payah tenaga kependidikan kita pada usia 66 tahun ini. Maka harapan saya adalah tenaga kependidikan mampu meningkatkan kapabilitas dan kapasitas sebagai garda terdepan dalam pelayanan yang diberikan kepada seluruh sivitas akademika. Dan juga saya mengucapkan kebanggaan dan kecintaan kepada para mahasiswa Fakultas Ekonomi Bisnis yang sampai dengan hari ini telah memperkuat FEB Unpad di dalam mengharumkan nama Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis baik di tingkat nasional bahkan di tingkat internasional. Sebagai penutup, hadirin yang saya hormati, saya mengucapkan selamat ulang tahun ke-66 untuk Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Padjadjaran. Semoga kita selalu bisa leading and inspiring. Dan tentunya kita akan terus berkinerja, bermanfaat dan mendunia. Marilah kita selalu berdoa kepada Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, semoga kita diberikan kekuatan untuk mampu berkontribusi kepada bangsa dan dunia melalui Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Padjadjaran. Semoga Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala mengabulkan seluruh doa dan harapan kita. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
We extend our deepest appreciation to Profesor Dr. Hajah Nunuy Nur Afia, SEMS, AKCA. The next scientific oration will be delivered by Professor Harman Opowol, PhD. We extend our invitation to deliver the scientific oration on the topic of disposal-based scarcity, how overstock reduction methods influence consumer brand perceptions and evaluation. With great formality and respect, let us extend our warmest welcome to Professor Harman Opawol, PhD.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here, and I will share my screen. Is the sound all okay? Can you all hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Okay. I will share my screen. And that will be this one. Allow me 1 second. It should all work now. I hope you can see my screen as well. While I reorganize
It is
my...
good.
All right. I'll try to just make this a bit bigger so I can see the room as well. First, thank you for inviting me. I have very good memories of my previous visit to Pacitan 4 years ago, and Diana invited me then to do a talk which was about a very different topic. Today I'll be talking about what we call disposal-based scarcity, which links very much to your topic of sustainability for this DSRA event. And I would like to just mention my co-authors, who are Dr. Owen Nguyen from Kanto University, who is a PhD graduate actually from the University of New South Wales, where my co-authors are also from. And the project that I will be presenting is actually based and extends the PhD thesis that Owen has conducted, but it goes well beyond the PhD. The topic is about scarcity and especially disposal-based scarcity, as we call this, and I will hope to explain a bit what we mean by this and how relevant it is. I just need to change my settings slightly so I can actually get a bit of a sense of the room. There we are, yes. And the topic is very much related to management of waste and overstock, which is an ongoing issue, of course, in retail. Retailers have to decide how much to buy, whether to buy enough, and they usually will buy just a bit more, so they have no out of stock and have to disappoint consumers. In the meantime, of course, they will have redundant stock, and the question is what to do with that. And that is very much a question of what happens behind the scenes, like a back office issue. In our project, we argue that actually this could be a method that retailers and brands can use to build a better profile and contribute to perhaps sustainability. Now, there is an issue there. Increasingly, as you're very aware, companies are under pressure to behave well, and corporate social responsibility is increasingly important. This is an example of just a while ago where the major luxury brand Louis Vuitton kind of tries to help and show that they care about energy and about the environment. So they told their staff to take the stairs, even for a luxury brand, at times of very limited energy when everyone was kind of complaining about high energy prices and had to put the heater down, especially in Europe. Now, that's one example where a brand tries to build an image and play the responsible role. Another example, almost the extreme opposite, is Balenciaga's news, and they've been in the news a few times recently with very controversial actions. In this case, actually burning and selling very highly for a high price a pair of sneakers that had been destroyed, had been molested, had been worn. So totally controversial and against the normal way of behaving. And this led to a lot of uproar from consumers and actions against his brand. So they seem to kind of really overdo and take the wrong action. Although one might think that these very extreme brands are on purpose almost seeking to be in the news at all cost and hope to build a brand image with that. Now, our study is a bit onto that topic, but specifically on the topic of what do companies do with their redundant stock? And in particular, the issue that sometimes brands, I'm just checking if there's, I noticed some activity, whether, I hope I can be understood. The sound is clear. I hope so. So a top brand like Burberry has been in the news that they have been burning their stock. And this again has led to a consumer backlash where people feel like this is not on, this is good product, should not be burned, it should be still used somehow. And so this was a starting point for a project that Burberry and similar companies should find another way to deal with their overstock versus how do consumers actually respond if companies do take these kind of actions. And we focus specifically on the issue that these top brands try to avoid that their overstock would be sold off for a lower price and would hit the market such that it would undermine their perception of exclusivity. So the question of what happens to the unsold stock led us to studying this. And on top, there's of course the issue increasingly of recycling of textile and of fashion. And this is actually quite problematic because it's very difficult to do recycling well. In the meantime, alluding to one of our main findings is that people, consumers, respond very favorably, very positive to recycling if a company is known to practice recycling. So that led to our main project, and this is the title of the paper that we published in a main marketing journal just recently. And in my talk, I'll just give some of the overview of what we found to give you a sense of what's actually happening. So specifically, we focus on scarcity, and anything that is scarce is kind of having value to people. That's well known. And especially if it's like scarcity because of exclusivity. Whereas, of course, if you have too much stock, if you have leftover stock that's not sold, this suggests that there is too much, which means almost automatically a lack of value, perhaps a lack of popularity. People don't want it. And so we, on the one hand, argue that, yes, with how you manage overstock and how it is in the news or in the media or how consumers get to know about it, could you build your perceptions as an exclusive or as a popular brand? And then secondly, we focus on the flip side of that, which is that if you are known to handle your stock not properly, or specifically if you are wasteful, that might have a very negative effect because consumers don't like wastefulness. They have an aversion to waste. And they kind of, it's well known from literature that people are very upset if they hear that good product is being wasted. So in our study, we compare so-called destructive methods versus non-destructive methods, which include like donating your redundant stock to a charity or discounting in a parallel channel versus a case where there would be no overstock. So you actually manage your business such that you not have redundant stock, you just have enough. And we try to find out how that kind of influences brand evaluations. As you can see on this slide, this summarizes our main study. And we argue that the brand evaluation will depend on how overstock is reduced. And the way in which these brands are evaluated will depend on how people perceive a brand as being exclusive or not, popular or not, and wasteful or not, which is important as on its own right for brand managers to know how their product is perceived. As you can see on top, I will only briefly mention that further. We also argue that this might depend on the type of brand. A more luxury brand will have a different way in which this happens, this process plays out, and also whether someone is very connected to a brand, like feels connected to the brand, feels like the brand is part of them, they care about the brand. So briefly on that, we argue that as people are more connected to the brand, so they feel more like the brand represents part of them, they will be more strongly opposed to any change to their brand perception. So a stronger self-brand connection will mean that someone is less open to change because of hearing about overstock methods. And about luxury, we have a bit of a similar argument that especially luxury brands try to kind of make their product exclusive, for example, by burning stock. They're also increasingly held to be to account. So we expect that they will have a stronger kind of effect through these kind of actions of overstock management. So we studied this in quite some detail in 3 empirical studies among consumers, which were all done using online panels. And I must say these panels were of consumers mostly in the US, which limits to some extent the study. On the other hand, these processes are quite general, so we don't believe that that is a limitation. It's good to test this in any market. And so we did a few so-called scenario experiments, and then we tested these effects with 2 real brands that we used in an online, like an experiment, the brand Burberry and the brand H&M. Just to briefly, and I will spare you the technical details, but to give you a flavor, this was a fairly simple study where we just asked people different types of questions about different scenarios. So, for example, they hear that a well-known brand has recently incinerated, versus in another condition they will be told, oh, they donated unsold stock. And we asked them, how would you evaluate that brand? So quite straightforward. And this is an example of the type of questions that were inserted in this little task. And it was all kept the same. So it was all concerning goods and accessories, or in this case, perfumes worth over $30 million, like also appeared in the news. And I did not amend this for this talk in a nice graph, but you can see there were strong differences in how people would respond to that. So this gives a kind of first indication that people are responsive to this, but only a very first indication, of course. So the main studies we had were about having people deal with real products. Now, this was a bit tricky to set up in an online panel setting instead of in a real shop, but we created a set of tasks where people could buy, or basically could, in the participation in their survey, they were told they could get a real product. Specifically, we set it up so that they could, they had to choose which of these 2 products, 2 perfumes they would like to have if they would be selected to get a real product. We could not afford to give all the respondents a real product. So we said, you will be going into a raffle or a kind of a draw, and some people will get this product for real. And actually we did do that as requested, as required also by our ethics committee. And so people in the task were shown all this information about the brand, in this case Burberry, having 2 types of perfumes, and the one they would choose would be the one they would get if they would get the raffle. So they were really made to think carefully about a real product, about a real brand. So we then created a set of different types of information that people would be hearing about the brand. Specifically, we told them, suppose you have selected your product from this brand, and note that we had people in the sample who would not have much familiarity with this brand versus people who know the brand very well and buy often from them. And then we told, now you want to find out more about this brand because you just bought from them. So people would be therefore quite involved and keen to find out more about the brand. And then this was our main way of varying the information in different groups of respondents. We showed them this. This would be as if there are 2 websites or 2 articles from the news item Forbes, a well-known magazine. And so they just had been going through a set of questions and had chosen a product from Burberry. And then we told them, well, these are 2 articles in a news item, in a web page. Which of the 2 would you be more interested to read? And they could then click, but actually we had not an actual article behind it. It was mostly to expose them to this information, which in this case tells them that Burberry is incinerating, it's burning 38 million of stock, versus the other item being a neutral condition. Now, all people got 2 of these information items, and whether they were interested or not, they would read this and so be exposed to and hear about Burberry doing this. Now, this is one example, and we have 6 of these. So another one, so exactly the same type of picture, and on the right-hand side, it's always the same, but on the left, this tells them that Burberry is recycling their overstock and to the same total amount. And so we had one that says Burberry is donating, and one that says is discounting 38 million. And we had one which is like the comparison base, which says they usually sell their whole stock, which in our view is like being quite well managing your stock and not having any overstock. And then a last one, which was like, yes, they have overstock, but we don't tell the people how the brand manages their overstock. So they have to think about it if they want to for themselves. So that were the kind of overall types of versions we had. And each person only saw one of these, so we can then compare how they respond. So we had a whole set of questions, and I won't go through all the details, but we asked them these questions about how exclusive do you think Burberry is? How actually wasteful do you think is Burberry when they manage their stock? And also, what do you overall think of Burberry as a brand? How do you value or evaluate the brand? And this then shows in a way, the main result of that second study we did. You can see that the big drop is for destroy, where if they hear that the brand has destroyed stock, people are very, very negative about the brand. Whereas recycle, which we felt or expected to be, because it's also a form of destruction, would also be negative, is actually surprisingly high. And donate is high and discount is somewhat lower, but you can see the overall differences here. So we do find, firstly, that it does matter what you communicate to consumers, especially that destroy is negative. But then secondly, and this table is just to give you a flavor, but we have these measures of how exclusive the product is or the brand is, how wasteful the brand is. And you can clearly see that this kind of line indicates that the effects that we have here are very much driven by, on the one hand, a slight increase in exclusivity. So a brand like Burberry indeed is seen as more exclusive, which is perhaps something they want to achieve. But that effect is totally overwhelmed and dominated by that they are perceived high on wastefulness, which means that in total, they have a very low score. So the overall finding we have is that perceptions of wastefulness are much more important and impactful than perceptions of exclusivity. So if a brand wants to build exclusivity perceptions, you should be very careful in this case, because they will spoil it by just going very low through the wastefulness. And just one other one to mention, discounting, as you may imagine, for a top brand, is not a thing that people would expect is good, because luxury brands want to be exclusive. So if you start discounting, people indeed perceive it as a lower or less exclusive brand. And there's a slight effect from the wastefulness. So this is an example of how we tease out all these effects. And this is even more complex, but all it shows is that, yes, perceived wastefulness really matters a lot, but also if someone has a very strong connection with the brand, they're actually less susceptible to this. So these effects kind of are very much stronger if someone is not familiar or very connected to the brand, which makes sense because they have less an established opinion about the brand, you could argue. This kind of summarizes the main findings of our second study, and because of time and I can see the screen of the people in the room, but I'm not sure if there's any questions now or in a minute, so I will just continue, I think. And the chat, I can't see much either. So moving to what we then continued, going back to our overview, like a map of our research. We wanted to look also how brand type, so how a less luxury brand would be perceived. So we did basically the same thing with a new sample of respondents who went through a similar task, but now we focused on H&M as a kind of a well-known brand that is not so luxury. And we measured also how popular the product is, the brand is, and we added also whether a particular the brand was sold out, which is another way in which overstock can be managed and can be kind of working against the retailer, because if you sold out, you lose you lose trade on the other, and you disappoint consumers. On the other hand, it may mean that you're perceived as more popular because there's apparently a high demand, and or that you're more exclusive. So we did a similar thing. Here you can see the type of stimuli. So people got to the task where they could choose information about H&M and would hear that H&M is incinerating 38 million, or recycling, or donating, or discounting, or unsold stock. And we also added a condition where it just says, yeah, H&M is really often sold out. So that's the added company. So that brings us to this set of results when you measure what people think about the brand, how they value the brand. And similar, destroy, again, is very negative. And again, recycle is remarkably high. And there are differences all over, but smaller differences than destroy. So destroy is really very poorly perceived. And the differences between the other ones are certainly also relevant, but less critical. Just a quick snapshot of what the results look like for exclusivity. Again, some effect on exclusivity, a very positive effect for sold out. So indeed, if you sell out your stock often, if you're known to sell out, that will increase the perception of being an exclusive brand as well as being a popular brand. But again, the wastefulness is very much kind of negative for, it has a negative total effect on for destroy, whereas the other ones are all seen as less wasteful. So results, as said, overall are somewhat similar to the previous study, but we do find that there's less effect through this exclusivity, and even a negative effect on popularity if a product is being destroyed. So there's not much good to say about destruction. And I mentioned the sold out condition, that it does increase the exclusivity perception and the popularity, but would not otherwise overall impact the brand evaluation so much. So that sums up the main findings of the studies. We did some extra data collection that I will not go into detail of, but there may be questions about this in a minute. I'll try to summarize what we find and what it all means. Well, I think we, through this set of studies, showed that, yes, managing your overstock has particular effects on consumers' perception in different areas like exclusivity, popularity, and also on behavior. I should mention that in our task, we also asked people how likely they are to buy the brand, and we found less strong, but still effects on that as well. So the effects are not only about how brands are perceived, but also how likely people are to buy the brand. And if it's about influencing perceptions of exclusivity, then only destruction and discounting are tools that a retailer or a brand can use. We find that this level of self-brand connection makes a difference, that those who are having a stronger connection with the brand are less susceptible to these effects. And overall, and this is a bit like the general theory and ideas about scarcity, how you manage overstock had not been properly documented and developed yet. So we have, and this is a very detailed table, but this is the types of scarcity that are well known in the literature. They can be either demand-based, so there's a high demand, a lot of people wanting to buy a product. They can be supply-based, so there's just a shortage because of limited resources in production and so on. And you can see some examples here as well. Or it can be scarce and limited because of just a temporary unavailability or a temporal kind of promotional action even, versus then what we call the disposal-based scarcity. How that adds up to what it actually means for further management? Well, we, through our work, hope to have shown that instead of only being once off in the news, if you have bad luck as a main company and you're caught out by your actions, versus everything is in the back office and it's just a logistics operation, it can be used for active brand management, how you manage your stock and how you communicate this to consumers and to the marketplace. But there's also an issue that it's not so easy because, as we show as well, the way you manage your or dispose of your overstock has this mixed effect on either perceptions of waste, or that you're not so popular, or that you're not exclusive. So it's quite tricky how to find the right balance. And against that background, also the increasing focus on social responsibility, especially about waste management and environmental sustainability, but also charities and overall extent to which a brand kind of does good in society, supports the community and so on, is increasingly important and clearly shown in our study as the dominant perception. And this goes against the ideas that these luxury brands like Balenciaga and so on can just do as they like. It's not like they, I think, have been able to create the rules for themselves. They are still held responsible. We find no positive effects actually also for these brands. And all that up, we put it together in a kind of summarizing framework. Now, this study, to be honest, was quite a lot of work to do, but of course it's only a tip of the iceberg. And as you may think, this is all about how people respond when they just see a headline, like a possible news article. So they get to know what these brands do, but they don't read the details. And we, in our study, did not kind of follow up people a week or a month later to see if they still had these changed ideas. So we have only effects measured in a very short window. I should mention also that, as you can see, we had different versions of the same information. After people had completed the study, they all got information that this was for the purpose of research and that only one of these conditions was actually the real information as it has been in the news, and that the other ones were created for research purposes. So the research ethics means that you have to debrief people after they have participated in this kind of research. Of course, if brands start to use this more, it will create new competitive effects. And it may also mean that, yes, for once it's novel, but it may wear off quite quickly. And we don't know yet what it will mean. If a brand has been doing a lot of recycling or donating, and whether it would have long-term effects also in terms of what competitors do. Very specific is that, strikingly almost, is how people have an almost instinctive response to waste. People have an inbuilt emotional response that they don't like waste. Anything that goes to waste is, for many people, something that is just not proper. And that's not about money, just it's like what they call sometimes unused utility. That's been shown in the literature. So to what extent that kind of overtakes any other type of trade-off that people may make about how to deal with waste, how to recycle, where to recycle, is an ongoing issue. And then if you think of a company, they can use different combinations. They could do a bit of recycling, they could donate part of their overstock, they could put it in discounting. We don't know yet how different mixes are kind of perceived and what's the optimal combination. And also, as I mentioned, I think, yeah, we studied mostly some Australian, but mostly American consumers. And that's, of course, a particular group that is not representative for other cultures, other continents. So there may be differences there, although we also think that the overall effects we find would be quite robust. And important is also to what extent is the reason for the need to get rid of overstock explained to people. If people know there's overstock because of bad management, may be very different from if there's overstock because of a kind of a natural disaster or supply problems. So who is to blame is very important, no doubt as well. And lastly, the extent to which how a company behaves in this context, whether that gives them a kind of license socially to be perceived as good community citizens, is an ongoing issue that is in the background to all this. Just to finish up, I said recycling is very positively perceived by consumers. To our surprise, more even than we thought. But in practice, it's difficult to actually do recycling such that you get good new products. So we wonder what happens if people would find out more about the problems of recycling, or in this case, one of the few things that you can do with old clothes is kind of make pillows and plastic pellets, apparently. So the technology to better recycle is certainly important to develop, and recycling. And if consumers would find out more about how difficult it is to make recycling work, they may therefore have a less positive view on recycling. And that's the kind of technical as well as societal problem of how to improve recycling. But as we know, like fashion, it's very difficult to recycle properly because it's very difficult to tease out all the different types of fabric and so on. So that concludes my presentation.
And our deepest appreciation to Professor Harman Opowell for imparting an exceptional scientific oration. And we would like to express our gratitude for the knowledge that has been imparted. We extend our deepest appreciation to Dr. Dani Amrul Ihdan, SAMST, for imparting an exceptional scientific oration, and we would like to express our gratitude for the knowledge that has been imparted. We will proceed to the next agenda. The Dean of the Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Padjadjaran, concludes the scientific oration.
Sebelum saya menutup upacara ini, saya ucapkan terima kasih atas kehadiran rekan-rekan seluruh kolega dosen, para guru besar, para mahasiswa, dan saya banggakan dan yang saya hormati Bapak Dr. Dani Amrul sebagai Wakil Direktur Mind ID yang sangat kita banggakan. Dan oleh karena itu maka dengan mengucapkan puji syukur kehadirat Allah Subhanahu wa taala, maka kita akan menutup upacara Dies Natalis ke-66 Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Padjadjaran dengan ini ditutup. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
In concluding the scientific oration on the occasion of the 66th Dies Natalis of Faculty of Economic and Business Universitas Padjadjaran, I extend my gratitude to all attendees for their presence. The subsequent agenda is a group photograph. I respectfully invite you to stand up. Baik, foto bersama akan dilaksanakan. Boleh lebih merapat lagi untuk audiens yang ada di pinggir. Baik, sekali lagi untuk audiens bisa lebih merapat ke tengah. Baik, baik satu kali lagi. 1, 2, 3. Baik, bisa menggunakan gaya leading and inspiring. Baik, 1, 2, 3. Baik, untuk mahasiswa dipersilakan untuk duduk terlebih dahulu. Baik, the next agenda, the Dean along with the esteemed members are kindly requested to gracefully exit the premises. I would like to extend my gratitude for all attendees for their presence. Thank you, and until we meet again on another occasion. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Untuk rekan-rekan mahasiswa bisa keluar dari pintu yang di sebelah sini. Sekali lagi untuk rekan-rekan mahasiswa bisa keluar dari pintu yang sebelah kanan. Terima kasih.